2, 1. We're on. So this is Dean Tedder with the Two Party Podcast. I'm on here with Lois Hollis, and she's got an amazing story to tell us and talk about. And I really encourage our audience to deeply listen to this one. She's got so much to bring to the table today about guilt and shame, and she's written a book. She's working on a film that I believe is already out. Just an amazing woman. So I'm going to hand it over to Lois. Lois, I want you to just tell us who you are, a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and then go ahead and tell us your story.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you for this great opportunity to share this message, which is my job. So thank you so much for helping me to do my job.
We love having you here.
Thank you. I am a shame guilt educator, counselor, and filmmaker. And then I always hear, well, we never heard about that one before. You have to change your category. And I said, I can't change my category because that's what I do. Well, we don't talk about shame and guilt because it doesn't exist. And it makes people uncomfortable. So we talk about happiness and joy and being positive and loving each other. And I said, I'm all for that. But if you don't get rid of the shame and guilt, you'll never get to the loving. And They go, oh. And I said, well, there's another way of looking at it. If you don't know your enemy, how are you going to defeat it?
Yep.
So that's who I am. I'm teaching you about shame and guilt that is not in the culture. And the reason that I mean everyone, including myself, have not been able to defeat shame and guilt, the automatic, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, I'm guilty, I shouldn't be here. That program within all of us is because we did not get the right information from psychiatrists, psychology, and our culture advocates shaming and guilt behavior. Mm-hmm. So it's not your fault that you are not achieving what you want, that you also feel depressed, you feel anxious, you feel fearful.
I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Yes.
They need to understand and know that it's not their fault.
It's not their fault. It's not your mother's fault either.
Right. And that's the other one, is where people pass the blame or pass the buck, or they remain in a place where pointing the finger at someone else is easier than looking inward.
Well, of course it is, but it ain't going to get you home. I'm a basketball fan, so you got to go first, second, third, fourth, and you got to go home.
Correct.
Being positive is going to get you out of the dugout on first base, but it will never, ever get you home. I want to go home. I want to go home to love and happiness.
Yes.
Okay, so that was my goal. So I eventually found the real reason and the truth about shame and guilt. Divinely inspired. That's a whole show in itself. But I need to tell you that I am blessed to give this message out to people.
Yep.
And not afraid to be opposite what our culture is saying, because I created the first hemodialysis unit in the country, in the United States, in Pennsylvania. I've done a lot of firsts in my life. So it's not unusual for me to do something first, because that's just who I am. Mm-hmm. Okay, so once I decided that shame and guilt were the problems within my life, I was so excited, because I didn't have to go to therapy for depression. I didn't have to go to therapy for anxiety. I didn't have to do special sayings, special meditation, special mind games to get rid of my fears. I didn't have to read a long course. I didn't have to do this stuff, because I know it only got to first base, because that's every place I've always got is first base. And I was tired of sitting on first base.
Yep.
I wanted to get home. So I was infused with this information and I healed. Okay, I had some physical chiropractic and other healing people to help me, and nutrition and juicing, and you got to do the whole thing.
Yeah.
But the main part was the emotional aspect of shame guilt.
Yeah. You know,
Once,
you have to, like you just said, you had other aspects that you had to work on as well. And I think that's an important thing that the audience needs to remember is while you're working on your internal, your emotional, your spiritual, you also have to take care of yourself on the physical as well. It all balances each other out.
yeah, if you could kind of think of a wheel,
yep,
and you're the hub, okay?
yep,
And one spoke is nutrition, one spoke is your thoughts, your mind, one spoke is healing, either, massage or chiropractic or energy work. Yeah, there's so much out there. And spiritual, your
mm-hmm,
soul.
yep,
So you got to do all of them. But interesting that shame and guilt is the key to everything, because unbeknownst to us is that shame and guilt are the same.
mm-hmm,
Okay.
yep,
Shame is in the unconscious mind that goes at night saying you're uh, no good, and you're no good, and you're not good enough. And you have this tape inside of you. Why?
mm-hmm.
Because you got it from the culture. You got it from the religion. And if you didn't get it from religion, you got it from the school. If you didn't get it from the school, you got it from your parents.
It's from
And
like
if you had
society, it's
perfect,
kind of a society thing and an environmental thing.
yeah. And if your parents didn't give it to you, you had perfect parents, your friends gave it to you.
Right.
So you couldn't escape it. So it's not anyone's fault. It's shame, guilt is the fault of
Yep.
your problems today. Shame and guilt is not an emotion. What it is an energy that activates emotions. It turns positive emotions into negative emotions. Let's say if you have compassion and you have shame and guilt on that emotion, it turns to depression.
That's pretty deep. I've honestly never looked at it that way. I've always thought of guilt as I feel guilty, like a feeling.
Yes, but
Um,
it activated that feeling. So,
right, right.
okay,
And so
so
the way you're explaining it, it makes a lot more sense because I've always again thought of it as a feeling when you're saying it's not.
it's outs
I
it's
can grasp that.
outside of you. It's
Hmm.
shame, guilt. Okay, shame's in the unconscious and guilt is in the conscious mind.
Which makes a lot of sense. And you hear a lot with addiction counseling. You hear a lot of addicts. Some of the base that they're surrounding their addiction in is guilt and fear, as well as the shame.
Okay, fear is shame.
Hmm.
Okay, all negativity is shame, guilt. Okay, so I need to backtrack. Shame and guilt are the same energy. I call it shame guilt.
Yep.
I don't call it shame. Now, our culture says, most people say, shame is bad and guilt is good.
Right.
We need guilt to be responsible. We need guilt to be moral. Well, I invite us, our culture, to step up and say, I want to help my friend move, not because I'll feel guilty that I didn't help him, but because I love him and it's the right thing to do.
Right.
We have to up our game.
Hmm.
Don't do things out of guilt. Do things that it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. Out of compassion and caring. Yeah.
I just want to help my friend. No, that's not something I want to do because that doesn't affect this and this and this. So you can say no to stuff, but that's another
Yep.
story.
Yeah. There
So
doesn't
shame,
have to be strings attached to just
yeah,
doing something good.
you just do it right. Life is very simple. We have gotten it complicated. Anyway,
Yep.
shame, guilt is an energy.
Hmm.
Okay. It's outside of us. Anything that's outside of us, we can get rid of.
Which is great.
Hello. Now you are so excited.
Yep.
But the problem was 15 years ago when I had this wonderful breakthrough, I wanted to shout it to the world.
Hmm.
And nobody would let me talk about it because they didn't talk about shame and guilt. And they said, it doesn't exist, Lois,
Right.
because if you keep talking about it, it exists. And I'm going, well, I don't see how you're ever going to get well, because if you don't recognize your enemy and recognize the obstacle in your life and jump over it with just be positive, I don't see how you're going to get off first base.
Yep.
And so with the virus thing happening, our world has turned upside down.
It has. It has.
And the beauty is that I am so busy. I am so excited. Finally, I get to do my stuff. So I'm very happy to do that because that's my job.
Well, I've done similar, since this pandemic started. I mean, I've taken more opportunities to work on myself. I've taken more opportunities to work with my wife and help her, and to help my son. And so, while a lot of people are maybe in some sort of complacency, or they're just like, they lost their job, or they're just dealing with so much depression, anxiety that they can't move forward from it or use this opportunity to grow. I've been trying to use this opportunity in the pandemic to grow.
Well, you're on the right path. Now, I have to explain something. Why then, if shame, guilt is the same energy, negative, of course, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a long story how that happened. That's another interview. But why does it have two names? Okay. Our culture does that to information. I'm a nurse.
Yep.
And please forgive the simplicity of what I'm saying, if any doctor's listening. If you have a bacteria in your stomach, they call it gastritis. If you have the same bacteria in your lungs, they call it pneumonia. If you have it in your brain, they call it meningitis. Okay, that's simplistic, of course, but
Right.
It shows the point that even though it's the same substance, if it's in different locations in the body, they give it different names.
Right.
Now, this is very, very important because you can't get rid of guilt until you get rid of the shame. You never work on guilt. You have to work on the shame that's feeding the guilt.
Almost, it's basically the core of the two.
Exactly.
Okay.
So shame, guilt are twins, or however you want to say it, but they are
partners in crime. Maybe they're partners in crime.
Oh man, that's a great title. We met the partners in crime today.
There we go.
And that's true. Now, it's very important to see that, because now people are going, oh, guilt is no good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all know shame probably isn't any good, but a lot of people say we need more shames too. So I got to talk to those people. Anyway, shame, guilt is one energy. And if you go on my website, I have a video on that. So there's a lot of visuals on that. And that's what my new film is going to be in January. I'm going to make shame, guilt visible so people can see it actually exists.
Excellent.
And it's outside of us. So what it does is that it affects our emotion. Now, how does it do that? It's very, very clever.
Mm-hmm.
When someone shames you in language like, you did that again, I expected you to do that, Anytime you feel bad when someone says something to you, it's not so much the words, it's the energy that they're propelling to you. They're throwing their shame onto you.
Almost a projection then.
Well, not a projection. They actually transfer it to you.
Okay.
Different than projection.
Right.
Because it's like, did you ever play the game Hot Potato? They pass something around the circle.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Shame and guilt is so horrible to carry unconsciously. You don't know it. But unconsciously, that you just want to get rid of it. How do you get like, oh, I'm in a bad mood today. What the heck? Fuck him, whatever. Excuse me.
Right. No, you're fine. We're an unfiltered show. You're fine.
Okay. You stupid jerk, instead of trying to help like a kid, 8-year-old, what did you do that for? It's stupid. Well, the kid never was taught it. So okay, we still need to discipline our kids and all that. It's the tone of voice, but it's actually the shamer feels better after they shamed somebody.
Right. That makes sense. And we see that play out in society day in and day out, whether it be in the bullying behaviors we see, whether it be in just in the general, even in the workplace, you see it, where somebody's basically almost in competition with someone else and trying to make them look bad all the time, the shaming. Yeah.
But that makes them feel bad. Okay, but it's a temporary feeling of feeling good for the shamer because they have to keep shaming people.
Right, which is unhealthy.
So I teach how to recognize shame, guilt, and how to repel it. Like, no, thank you, goodbye.
Yep. That's awesome.
Now, when someone is shaming you or guilting you, I have one answer that you can say, because I want people to have takeaways.
Of course, of course. I mean, I'm on the cliff right now wanting to know how I can get rid of this myself.
Okay, you say to them, isn't that interesting?
I actually use that quite often. Sometimes
Okay.
my wife gets mad when I use that.
Well, because yeah, she can't throw her shame onto you.
Well, sometimes she just thinks I'm being sarcastic because I'm kind of a sarcastic person. So sometimes I say, well, that's interesting. And she's like, don't start.
Well, it's your tone of voice.
Right.
So, well, that's interesting.
Yes.
Or you could say, that's interesting. Say it without punch.
Right. And what does that do by using that term? How have you found that works?
It repels it because you don't take it. Now, when you start arguing with somebody,
it's like always a waste of time.
What it is that you're getting the shame and then you throw the shame back again. It's the shame game.
Okay. So you're playing hot potato with the shame then? With
the person. And it will never, I never do couple counseling because it's ridiculous. You got to fix yourself, then you come together. But anyway, that's another story.
Yep. I have a feeling I'm going to have you back on more often.
Well, that's okay. This is a story that started with Adam and Eve. So how many hundreds of years are we talking about it? So I want to get in these minutes now. What's something that can help you shift your mind? And that's a big deal.
Yes.
If you can just shift your mind, it's not my fault. I have depression, but I don't have to talk about depression. I have to talk about shame and guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Shame, guilt. Always put it back to shame, guilt. Never, ever, ever say my shame or my guilt. Never own it.
Right. And that would make it harder to get rid of.
Well, yeah, you're like calling it, come on, screw me more. You know,
right. Like you want it to hang out with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Never.
So we shouldn't own it, and we should definitely call it out and repel it.
Yes. But, you know, we're just talking topics here.
Yep.
But that's enough to change the consciousness of people. And yes, your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your teacher or your priest shamed you, but it's not their fault. It's because they were taught to shame you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the person there is good, but it's the shame they're throwing at them, and they don't know what we know today.
Right. Well, hopefully my audience can detect that now, hearing you explain it.
So that's number one. Don't get more shameful because your positivity hasn't worked 100%. Because I'm telling you, it won't. And you cannot get rid of the guilt that you've been hitting and cursing and swearing about, because you have to find the shame in your childhood that activated that guilt. And we can do that. That's what I do. That's what I help people. I help them to find the shame that they encountered sometime in their life. And you have to find, like you cleaning your house. How do you clean your house? You got to pick up the stuff to throw it away.
You got to identify it to find what's trash and get rid of it.
Yeah, and then you can release it. You cannot say, I release all the shame, guilt in my life. Well, you know what? If that worked, we'd all be saints.
Hey, I would love it if that was that easy.
And if it was, we wouldn't be talking.
Right? So tell us, what's the next step that we would want to try to start working on?
Okay, I want people to rephrase their speech. A lot of times people say, oh, it's such a shame. It's raining today. I can't have my barbecue. Don't use the word shame. It's sad. It's unfortunate. It's stupid. But don't say shame, because then again, you're calling it to you.
Right.
See how unconscious it is?
Yeah. I mean, it's something as simple as our own words that we're just ingrained to use, or maybe it got in a bad habit of using that word.
No, we were taught to use those words. Okay. Yeah. It's not our fault.
Yep.
It's our fault if we don't fix it.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
But it's not our fault that we're all in this trouble. but it's our fault if we don't try to get out of it.
Yep.
Okay. So be aware of the use of shame in your vocabulary. Oh, it's such a shame that I flunked the exam. Well, it's not shame, it's sad and it's unfortunate, but don't use the word shame.
Yeah.
And interesting, you'll find people using that so much and you go, that's really stupid to use that word there. But you don't tell them that,
Yeah. Well, not unless you want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah. So that's one way to stop. So there's three things. One, you have to learn shame guilt behaviors because we were not taught that.
Yeah. So you have to recognize them.
You have to recognize it. Second, you have to find the shame that you have accumulated in your life. And it has a starting point. This is very interesting. There's a thing that happened when you were 5 years old. I mean, everybody remembers some incident, and we're not doing meditation and hypnosis. That is not healthy in this situation. Okay, it has a place, but not in this particular situation. Right. Because meditation helps you escape your emotions.
Right.
I want to be in peace and love, and that's good, but not for this particular exercise.
This one we particularly want to recognize and face it consciously.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And this tapping thing, they tap it away. Well, you know what? I could tap all day and
it's not going to help.
Well, it makes it worse because you're denying your emotions from talking. Your emotions are really
You could almost say with the tapping thing and different techniques like that, you could almost say that you're substituting one thing for another. So you're basically burying the shame and guilt in order to pick up a new habit of tapping or something.
Exactly.
Else. Yeah.
Exactly.
So it doesn't help you face it.
Exactly. So whatever, where was I?
So then we were on our next step. So we know we gotta recognize it. Then we need to identify.
We gotta find it.
Then we gotta find where it's from, locate its identity, and locate the description of where it came from. Yeah.
And a lot of people are now it's in the common knowledge about interpersonalities, like we have anger or this or that. And I have a video on YouTube about this that people can go to and look at it and understand what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And they're the ones that inside of us is carrying the shame, and we get rid of it because we found it. And then we got to go, oh, I got to get smart and learn how to avoid it.
Right.
Because it's always going to happen to us, but how do we deal with someone that's shaming us?
So to be clear, now we're trying to identify it. Now that we've identified it, we don't want to ignore it, but we want to make sure we don't allow it to come back in new situations.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I don't have a course on this because there isn't a course on that because everybody's different, but I can label where we're going.
Yes.
And I have sessions, I help people, and I think I'm going to get
I think we've in our society as a whole, obviously we don't communicate, we don't work on relationships like we obviously used to when you and I were growing up, and the world's changed a lot, but the way I look at it is when I was growing up, I had a really rough and dysfunctional childhood for sure. And my mom was gracious enough to get me in counseling. She was gracious enough. My whole entire life, I think I went through counseling, and I thank her for that. Because it helped me to learn different coping skills, and it also helped me work through the things that I was having issues with. But what was the most important to me about counseling, which I think kind of touches on where we're going with this conversation, is talk therapy. Being able to talk about the shame, talk about the guilt by identifying it. Like you said, you got to identify it, but you also got to pinpoint it. But you don't want to ignore it. There's a time and place where you really need to have an open relationship, whether it's counseling or even with yourself, to where you're having a discussion about this. It needs to be a type of talk about it, work through it, right?
And the reason I'm very adamant and available for podcasts is because the present psychology system does not see the shame guilt paradigm that I am showing you.
They don't recognize it.
They don't know it.
Yeah.
They haven't done it themselves. I will tell you a personal experience. I went to counseling many, many, many years because I was suicidal, I was depressed. Well, that's what you, and that helped me.
Yep.
It really helped me talking, not to want to commit suicide anymore and not to be so depressed. But like I was like halfway there, but you know how it is, you're better, but you're really not, but at least you're not falling apart.
I like to compare that to when I ask somebody or tell somebody to try to reach out and help others. Just helping somebody in that moment gets them out of maybe a suicidal mind state or gets them out of a depressed mind state. Even if you put a smile on someone's face, it's enough to remove it temporarily.
Exactly. So that's where I was.
Yep.
And every time, and I wanted more, so I stayed with therapy. And it's an hour, and I would talk, and then it takes a while to get to the shame guilt part inside of you. It isn't like, oh, hi, it takes about 40 minutes or half an hour to get to that moment. And then I would be overwhelmed because I would touch the shame of my childhood. And I would cry, and they would say, session over.
Yeah, and that was it.
But they didn't know what to do once the shame was exposed.
Right. And I think a lot of psychiatry and a lot of counseling, like you said, you reach that point where now you're talking about it. Now you're in an emotional mess over it while you're just trying to work through it. And then like they say session closed, which that's the most important point and time where the session should not end. The session should continue to help you work through it.
Exactly. And I'm not condemning therapy because it's really
helped. Of course not. It's helped me for, again, it's helped me. And I love the professionals that worked with me. But like you said, you're recognizing something that's not taught or not addressed in counseling. And when you reach, like you said, when you reach that plateau where you have learned that this is what's going on, there needs to be people like you that can help people work through that.
And they don't understand that shame guilt is not an emotion. And that's why I value the time that you are giving to this to enlighten people.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, there have been people that came to me who had done 10 years of therapy, 5 years of therapy, and that can go on for quite a while. And then I spend time with them like I'm talking with you. And then I teach them how to find the shame in their childhood, how to recognize it, how to release it. And then they keep doing that the rest of their life. So it isn't that we're sick mentally. We don't have we're labeled mental illnesses, but we just don't know the shame guilt story.
Yes.
So that's where I am today with you.
Yeah. Well, this is really, like I said, this is really enlightening. Like I said, there's a lot of things I have not, just the fact that the guilt, the shame is not a feeling. I'm still wrapping my head around that. And it makes sense the way you just described it. And that alone has educated me today. That alone has helped me to have something to look at and reflect on in myself and in some of my past.
And it makes you empowered. Doesn't it make you empowered?
Well, yeah, because I feel like I now know deeper about maybe what makes me tick, I guess, what makes me work. Yeah. That after all these years, I didn't know that. And looking at it now, I can start focusing on that portion of myself.
Yeah.
It's very enlightening. I really, I've booked a lot of these 30-minute slots, and we started a little early. I wanted to give you more time because I really want to get a little deeper into this. But I am going to have you back on at a later time for another episode so we can dive deeper into this. Because I really am, I think my audience, and I know I am interested in it. This is stuff that always, counseling and anything that deals with the psyche and just self-help and anything that can help another person is what I do. It's what I want to do. So I want to have you back on at a future date. Tell me a little bit more about, tell me about your book and tell me a little bit about your film coming up.
Okay. My book, it's, okay. I remember when I said everybody was coming to me because they got well and they send their mothers and their cousins and their kids. And I said the same thing to everybody, like I'm saying to you. I don't know how many times a day. I said, after a couple of years, I can't say this anymore. It's save your money, buy my book.
Yeah. Yep.
But I'm available for counseling.
Right.
But I think you can get a lot out of my book. So I wrote my book, but as you just said, I'm still wrapping my head around it. So this book is written in English and I think it's clear, but it isn't clear to most people because
Right.
it's a whole different way of thinking. So if people could get my book if they want and read it, but they're going, wow, I don't really get it. Well, you won't because,
So the book kind of lays out the framework or the
yeah,
foundation,
exactly like we're talking
and you're
now.
still doing an overall research and expanding it. So you may have 2 or 3 more books coming.
I don't know.
We'll see.
We'll see. I got a lot of like
But the
my
book
cup
itself lays out the framework.
exactly, and a lot of people say it's too academic. Well, we're entering a higher plane of learning. We're very human beings are awesome people.
Yes.
We really
Very
are
intellectual. Yep.
very, and we're adaptive.
Yes.
We're adaptive. When we have a problem, we adapt. We are so smart. We are so,
Hmm.
people go, oh, and that is true, but they don't tell us how to get there.
Right.
I'm telling you how to get there. That's
Yeah.
my job.
That's awesome.
That's my job. So you can get the book. It's Emotional Revolution Equals Evolution. And everybody told me to stop there, but I said no. Releasing Shame, Guilt. So
Yeah.
they said, if you put that in the title, nobody will buy it. And I said, oh, well, whatever.
Yeah. But that's
now
what
they're
you're
buying
that's
it.
the message you're conveying. And that's sometimes you've got to convey that message, whether you get advice from someone else. If you didn't put it on there, basically putting that on there summarizes what we're looking at.
Exactly.
And
so,
to me, that makes sense. Now that we've talked, it makes sense.
but a marketer did not like me, but that's okay.
Yeah,
He's
that
doing his
happens.
own shame and guilt.
Yeah, those exactly. Those guys sometimes don't know it all.
Okay, so that helps.
Yep.
And another thing would help if people would look at my website, and I have a couple videos there. And I don't know if you have show notes or something, but I can put the YouTube film I have on that so people can
I will
get it.
when I get done and I get this episode all edited up, I will add in the description links. I will add links to your website, to your book, and all of it. Yep.
That makes it easier for people.
For sure.
And the other thing is I want to tell people that they need to keep like a journal or a diary.
Journaling is very healthy.
It's also when I consider the whole human race, all have been told we're not good enough.
Yep.
In many ways. So what I had to do, and this is the advice of therapists, is that you have to counter one negative like 2 or 3 positives.
Mm-hmm.
So every time that I did something, I did good. Like when I was driving to someone's house and I never went there before, I would say, I did good, I found it. And then I would say, I did good, I only got lost one time. You can compliment yourself anyway,
Yes.
even if you did wrong.
I think we all need compliments.
But we have to, okay, when you compliment yourself in your own voice, it means 100 times more than someone telling you.
That's powerful.
That's very powerful. So I was so depressed, okay? So I made a tape of I'm good. I'm good at burning spaghetti. I'm good at making donuts. I'm very good at loving people. I'm very gracious in my work. I'm very bad at technology, but I do good. I'm very good at finding somebody to help me. No matter what it is, it's not about the negative positives. It's like I burn spaghetti so well, I'm an expert.
I think I've been an expert many a times on a lot of meals I've cooked.
But you don't look at it as a negative. You look like that's who I am, and I don't do some tech stuff because I'm very good at making a mistake with it.
It's interesting you bring that up because I just had a discussion with the guest just before you, and we just talked about I am one of those people when I look in the mirror, and it's taken me many years to get to this point, but when I look in the mirror, I look at all of my nobody's perfect, but I look at myself in all of what I consider my perfection, which is my imperfection. So when I look in the mirror, going along with what you said about complimenting, when I look in the mirror, I see myself nowadays versus how I used to look at myself. I see myself in the mirror nowadays, and I look at my imperfections and my problems or things I see as a problem, and I love them. I love that I'm an individual, and those are me. Those are my problems. Those are what
but
my
don't
imperfections
even call it
are.
imperfections.
I like to look at them. I like to look at them as my perfections. But I like when I explain it, I kind of explain it as imperfections. But when I look in the mirror nowadays, I love myself for the good and the bad.
And you don't even have to say for good or bad or perfect or imperfect. You have to neutralize things.
Right.
See, shame, guilt has taught us to be judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know any other way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I just said it. Yeah.
I know. So you can say, wow, I really have this cheekbone that's probably a half an inch bigger, and that's really cool because that's who I am.
That's awesome.
But it took me, okay, so what I did was, at the advice of a therapist, I taped my own voice.
Yeah.
And I set it to repeat, repeat, repeat. So for 15 minutes, I'd put this, well, it was a cassette in those days.
Yeah.
Put it in my ears, and I would listen to myself, telling myself, I'm good at writing, I'm good at burning spaghetti, I'm very good, you know. And you know, that really helped.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was so far down in the trenches. If someone was telling me what I'm telling you today, I couldn't even receive it. That's how far down I was.
Right.
So some people aren't going to get this, and that's okay, because you have to keep complimenting yourself.
It takes practice. It takes practice to get there.
We have to reprogram our shame, guilt mind. And
then reinforce it. Yeah.
Okay. And that's doable. It's very doable.
For sure. Well, I'm gonna close out and wrap up here with you. And like I said, I'm gonna have you on in the future. I want to get deeper into this because I'm really enjoying it. But please tell the audience where we can find you on your website. Any other information you want to promote, your film, anything you want to promote. Go ahead and tell the audience about that now. Okay, thanks so much for that intro. I can be found on the website, and it is Lois, Lois Hollis, HOLLIS.com. Of course, it has the www and all that other stuff, but loishollis.com. Okay. And in there, I give a free ebook. Okay. Now this, if you sign up for my emails, but the ebook is called 500 Questions Have One Answer. Now, this is not one ebook that you'll receive. One email that you'll receive. I made the 500 questions in 20 segments. Okay. So you're going to receive 25 segments at a time for a couple months. Very cool. And that's first base. That's teaching you how to recognize shame, guilt behavior. And I explained it in 500 questions. That's awesome. That's awesome. So all they have to do is just sign up for the email then. That's it. And then I have some people say, oh, I really want to talk about you to you, but it's like, you're so different. I don't know if I would spend the money. I give a free 15-minute session. Yeah. So you can, this is who I am. How do I sound to you? How do you, because everybody has different needs. Right. So and sometimes that's what it takes, is to build that relationship personally. Yeah. And if I can help somebody, I never charge them, because I answer to God, not to them. Amen. Amen. Well, I'll tell you, Lois, it's been great having you on here. I'll be working on this, and I'll send you over a copy link when we're ready to air this. But I'm going to go ahead. I'll have all the descriptions and links set up to go to this so that people can find your website, find your videos. But I really enjoyed having you on today, and I will for sure have you back in the future. Well, thank you. And God thanks you too. Well, you have a great day, okay? Okay, bye-bye. Have a good one.